Welcome to Practice Disrupted, a podcast where we find ways to create new solutions to current challenges while elevating the value of architects. I'm your host, Evelyn Lee, an architect who spans tech as an angel investor, startup advisor, and founder of Practice of Architecture. Whether you're a seasoned architect or just starting in the field, this podcast is your gateway to think differently about the role architects play within our global community. Hello, Disruptors. Thank you for tuning in this week. Today, we're bringing on a LinkedIn friend who has been traveling the world and talking about everything from digital transformation to people analytics, human resource technology, the future of work, and employee experience. And if you've ever tuned into the podcast before, you know that I geek out around everything data related, especially when it comes to building a better employee experience. So here's a little intro about my guest today. Dr. Serena Huang is a data analytics executive in Fintech, also known as the financial tech sector. She brings 10 years of professional experience working with large multinational companies such as GE, Kraft, Heinz, and Deloitte. As a data analytics executive, she is passionate about leading change, building high-performance teams, and helping business leaders see data as an asset in large organizations. She also happens to have a PhD in economics from the University of Kansas. So welcome to the show, Serena. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
We just read your more formal bio. We want to get into the conversation and kick it off a little bit more informally. Is there something else that you would like our audience to know about you as we jump into this?
Yeah, I am very active on LinkedIn. I do share a lot of content related to obviously data analytics, but also other important topics like mental health at work. So encourage everyone to check it out. I also have 3 courses on people analytics if anyone wants to get started as an introduction on LinkedIn Learning.
Yeah, so we will be sure to link to your profile and to your courses down in the show notes below so everyone can check that out. So thank you for that. I am an avid follower of Serena. We actually met through the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator a couple of years ago and have been in touch. She runs these mental health and well-being challenges, and she's a really great, wonderful cheerleader to have in your corner. So you and I kind of have a similar background working in an employee experience, you working in a very different part of employee experience than I tend to. How would you define, just because I don't think our audience in the AEC industry, that terminology gets thrown around a lot, how would you define what the employee experience is?
It's very simple. I would say it's what people experience at different parts of their work. That could be how they enter a building, to their interactions with a manager, to how their colleagues make them feel, to something that perhaps that's being talked about a lot since COVID is how easy it is to get their job done on their laptop. So all of that is part of employee experience. It's really how you experience work, put simply. And there's really people components to that, as well as physical space and digital space.
A lot of the conversations today, and I think when I think data analytics, is, how often are people coming into the office and things like that. But what else can we be measuring around employee experience other than just pure bodies?
Yeah. You know what? I am surprised that we are still having this heated debate 4 years later. I don't know about you, but really 2 years ago, I thought for sure this was going to be a topic that goes away. But we're still figuring out. And in addition to who's in the office, how often, there's certainly on the space side, sort of utilization. A lot of companies I've seen have started to add functionality for people to indicate whether or not they actually like the space. So it's not just how many people are there, but maybe there's like a little survey that you do that tells you how much you have enjoyed the space. And, remind everyone who has been to an airport recently, you have probably seen the smiley faces in restrooms, right? How was your experience? Was it smiley face, frowny face, and so on? And so I've definitely seen those additions since COVID. And in addition to that, traditionally, HR departments often will measure employees through surveys and focus groups by asking whether or not they would recommend their workplace to others. And that ranges from candidates who are interviewing for your company to people who are actually at the company. And, surveys are a really broad method, of course. There are different topics that people talk about. I think one area that deserves more attention, if you ask me, is the relationship between employees and their manager. Sometimes we'll call them manager effectiveness surveys, but really, if you think about it, that's the person that has such a huge impact on your life at work, such a huge impact on employee experience in general. It's the manager. Even if we work on huge teams and we collaborate with other functions, your manager ultimately can make your life amazing or sometimes horrible. So it's important for organizations to continue to get a pulse on how managers are doing. So manager effectiveness survey could be one way that gets you a lot of data around the employee experience, how people are handling day to day, their stress level, their interaction with their manager, the feedback they're getting, is it helpful? Are they helping them with career development? And all these are important topics to employees.
What are some of the type of questions that you would ask on a manager survey?
Oh, tough one. Okay. I have some favorite ones, and because I'm such an advocate for employee mental health, one of my favorite questions is actually, my manager cares about me as a person. And then you get to ask, strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. And it may seem atypical, but whether or not your manager cares about you as a person, if you think about it, it's important, because I don't want to just work for someone who only cares about work, someone who doesn't care about me if I'm suddenly ill or if I have something going on at home. I want someone who is empathetic and compassionate. Those are important things to me as an individual when I look for traits in a leader. So that could be one of them. And then the other aspects, I talk about career development, right? That's something really important to most employees. And you can ask questions like, my manager takes time discussing my career with me or something like that. And so that could be another way to get a sense of how they're spending their time. And you can ask even more specific questions around meaningful one-on-ones, right? Are they having meaningful one-on-ones with a manager? And as a general rule, the surveys I design, I always give everyone a chance to comment after each question. So now, meaning instead of waiting until the very end and asking people, is there something else you want to tell us? And you know what? By then, everyone's really tired of the survey. They just want to exit and go. But after each question, if someone has something to add, like additional context, they can put it there. And it's also great for the data analytics geeks because now we get to know what this comment is for, and it's not a general comment. So in the case of, are you having meaningful one-on-ones with your manager and things like that, if someone comments and said, I haven't met my manager at all in 6 months since I joined a company, that's a problem that leaders need to address, that your managers are not taking the time to meet with the team members. So I find that to be very, very helpful. So hopefully that gets you started.
Yeah. So I know you, and we talked about this before we jumped on the show. So when we say enterprise outside of the AEC industry, it usually means a very large company. So I was at Slack and Salesforce. I recently left there. We definitely had a people operations team who did these type of surveys. You came from PayPal. What size organization do you think you need to really be able to put something like data analytics to practice. And I think there's often concerns around from smaller organizations around anonymity in responses. So what size, and then how do you handle anonymity for the smaller offices?
Yeah, I would reverse that question perhaps. 'Cause, like, think about when you are starting a company, right? You're growing a team and maybe you have 5 people. As a leader of 4 people, you're probably pretty familiar with what's going on in everyone's work because there are only 4 of them. The question might be, at what point does asking everyone not make sense anymore? And you need a survey to help you with that. And it depends on how spread out the organization is, depends on how much time people spend in the office, where you can talk to them in person or not. That number may be 50, that number might be 100, that number may be 30. If you have a very global team, for instance, it could be difficult to, just from a even time zone collaboration perspective, to have a chance to speak to everyone together, right? There might be only 2 hour of overlap for the whole organization if it's very global. There could also be language and cultural challenges that make it more difficult. So I don't have a golden number, but I think the question is, at what point does it no longer make sense to ask individual person and have those conversations where data analytics can help by making that mechanism easier so that you can get the data you need. Now, I think you bring up a separate question around, keeping it anonymous, and psychological safety is the topic that comes to my mind when you say that, right? Because in an organization where you feel safe in speaking up, frankly, you probably don't need to hide who's answering what. But the reason that most organizations do is certainly to protect the identity of employees who may be having a hard time with perhaps a particular leader, perhaps a situation at work where they otherwise would not speak up. And so I think when ultimately, if there's no psychological safety, even if you make it anonymous and no one can find out who said what, it's still really difficult to get truthful responses because people are afraid.
I think we can easily go back like down the rabbit hole with this, because I've known, for instance, and I've actually talked to a few leaders in the architecture industry. They know they're bad leaders, and they almost don't want to do the survey to to find out the truth. It's not like they're horrible leaders. I think in their head, they know that they could do a lot of growth, or they know that the company has grown too fast. And there's like a feeling that it's gotten a little bit out of their own comfort zone. So how do you talk to people that are kind of afraid of knowing the truth? How do you talk to them from either a business case or a human case about why this is so important and about this mindset of growth and learning?
Yeah, the question is really simple. I just ask, would you rather know? That's it. Would you rather know or would you rather not know? So if the answer is I would rather not know, then that means they won't do anything with the data no matter what it says. And at that point, I actually suggest not doing the survey. So, people have all kinds of rules about what a good survey is. And I only have one really simple rule, which is if no action or decisions will be made based on the response to this particular question or survey, we're not doing it. That's it. Because it's a waste of not necessarily just my time, but as the survey designer and analytics person, but also to the employees who are filling it out, to people who are giving you feedback. If you are not going to change anything, then really don't do it, because it's going to cause even more frustration when you are asked and then nothing changes. So I think, when I ask a question, would you rather know? Most leaders I run into will say, okay, I know it's going to be tough, but I would rather know. So then we work through what exactly are we going to do about potentially not so positive news from a survey. What are we going to do about that? Whether it's a development plan for particular leaders or additional follow-up with employees who have been working for not so great leaders, right? That plan can start even before if we're anticipating some problems already. And then really what I've also seen is sometimes there's fear of this data is now somewhere that, right, is there going to be legal action? Is this going to become evidence for legal action? I think that's ultimately the fear in especially large organizations who might have a lot of cash at stake if they get sued, and totally legitimate concern. So there are many ways to go about that. Of course, you can also hire a third party to come in and just have interviews instead of data, a survey, and so on, and worrying about who is going to tell the truth, who is not. Maybe have someone completely unbiased outside the company come in and just sit down with employees on an individual basis and ask them what's going on, how they are experiencing that leader day to day. That's one way to do it too, right? And then that person, that vendor, can summarize the finding from the interview and then share it with senior leaders without disclosing who came to the interview, who said what, and so on. So I definitely see the alternative approach.
Yeah, I definitely. So I've been in organizations, and I actually used to do a lot of, I was a workplace strategist. We did a lot of these type of surveys too. As part of my MPA courses, and we spent a whole semester, and honestly, it probably wasn't enough around the science behind asking the question and making sure they're not leading questions right when it comes to designing surveys. But one thing I learned is that what you do after a survey can actually build trust and build the right type of culture and make good culture change within an organization. My question for you is how, is there a time frame that like you have to have the survey done and then you begin to act on the findings of the survey, that if you languish for too long, that you begin to lose trust and take things in the other direction?
Yes. Well, the answer is as soon as possible, which I know is difficult sometimes. One of the questions I get a lot is how many surveys should I run a year? And my question back to the team is always, how quickly can you act on the survey? Right? You should not run another survey before you have completed the actions and people feel the impact from the changes. If that is 3 months for you, great. If that's 6 months, if that's a year, if that's 2 years, you know the answer to that. It's probably not 2 weeks. So unless you're asking, one simple question about snacks in a break room and you can immediately provide it, great. But chances are for those larger cultural issues, it might take time to address. So I think it's equally important to also share, sometimes organizations forget this part, is that they do the analysis on the survey findings, they put action in place, and then they forget to tell the employees. So it's really important to have that communication and say, because of what you said, we didn't think of this in some vacuum in a conference room, but because of your feedback, we have created these changes for you to make your experience at work better. And then measure it again and see if those items do change, see if people are feeling the impact. And sometimes I would throw in question around whether or not people believe that their feedback is going to be impactful and influential. Again, it's tricky because the score is usually not as high as people hoped. so so I might ask something around, I believe actions will be taken based on my feedback in the survey or something like that. But I will be very direct about it. And it's something I might ask on multiple surveys. Because when you see that score drop or increase, you know you are doing worse or better on your action taking, not just action planning. So I think a lot of companies are really good at the action planning, but the action taking is what takes time. And by the time people actually feel an impact too, well, that still might take some time. So plan in advance for how quickly you can take actions and then how quickly people can feel the impact before you run the next one.
A lot of companies, back to this whole like office conversation, have been doing what call it like pulse surveys to like,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and I feel like, those could happen on a monthly basis sometimes because they're like 2, 3 questions. How do you come up with a strategy? I feel like it has to be a whole purposeful survey strategy around what you're measuring, the questions you're asking, what you hope to do, how you hope to change. Where do you even get started on that?
Right. So the pulse surveys typically are complementing those larger, longer, and less frequent surveys, and are more targeted on what they're asking. So they might be shorter, could be one question, could be three questions. At one point, I did do a daily survey, and that may seem like a lot, but really I had a set of questions that I was rotating. So maybe today I ask about your experience with your manager. Tomorrow I ask about how your commute is into the office. Maybe the following day I ask you whether or not you can find lunch easily. So every day is going to be different. Why do I do that? Well, one, no one wants to be bored, right? Like even in answering survey, I don't want to be bored. So part of the rotating keeps the question interesting for people who are taking it, and also allows me the chance to get at different aspects of employee experience without sending a 20 question survey every single day. That would easily fatigue everyone. So there are many different ways of designing that. But again, I go back to focusing on figuring out what problem you want to address first. Are you hearing, do you want to do a survey because you're hearing a lot of noises around the experience in the office? What is it related to? Is it interaction with other people? Is it the noise? Is it ability to find food? Is it ability to find a quiet space? So those can all be different. It could also be, well, we used to have lots of on-site training. We don't have those anymore. Or we used to have a lot of mentoring that's more interactive, and we don't have that anymore. So whatever those signals that prompt you to want to do a survey in the first place, focus on those problems that you want to solve, and then that can help you design the pulse survey however frequent you want to do that, and really then focus on the a few pillars, and then design questions by those pillars.
What if I'm a firm owner and I'm afraid to ask a question that I don't want to get the answer to because I can't afford the solution? So, in architecture, for instance, I know wonderful leaders who would love to give their employees more time away when they start new families, whether they're adopting, whether they have their children, or employees like me who are like struggling with being kind of the sandwich generation, right? I'm dealing with end of
Yeah.
life on my parents' side, but I
Right.
also have young kids at home. But we run our business so slim that we can't afford to
Mhm.
keep a lot of people on overhead. So I just don't want to survey them because I don't have a solution.
I agree, and I feel you that is something that holds a lot of companies back from even doing surveys around return to office, because they're afraid that they can't meet the needs that employees share back, whether it's a subsidy for commute, right, or additional flexibility. It could be time off, it could be something else. But again, I go back to, would you rather know? And it comes down to the communication, right? Because we all have needs to be heard as humans, fundamentally, whether it's at home, in a relationship, or at work. And so for employees to feel heard, instead of ignoring the elephant in the room, which is like, hey, in big cities like San Francisco and Chicago, commuting is really time consuming and very expensive, and it creates lots of problems. Instead of ignoring that, why don't we ask and then come up with some solutions? It may not be the perfect solution, but I think if the leadership team is coming from a place of care, genuine care, that we want to do something about this issue. We know commute is difficult, for instance. We know you want more flexibility and more time off. We can perhaps not afford 6 months time off that's paid for everyone, but here's what we can do. And then communicate, right? Again, going back to communication, communicate that back to the employees and say, we heard you. This is what we heard that you're asking for. And because of the budget situation, we cannot get there right away, but here's what we can do right now. And then really invite the employees into the conversation at that point, right? At this point, there's not more surveys to ask, are you happy with the new solution? No, just have additional conversations about this temporary solution or a cost effective solution that we can afford right now as a business. Is it helping you at all? If the employees are saying, oh, look, it's really, it's a little bit helpful, so thank you, great, keep doing it. If the employees say, look, it's not really doing anything, it's still not helping me at all, then stop spending your money on that item and move on to a new solution. So, yeah, so I'll keep repeating myself, but would you rather know, again, in those touch points, would you rather know how people are responding to your solution that is affordable to you? And hopefully the answer is yes, because it's worse to not know. So in most cases.
I do think you touched on an important point there, because I think no matter what size of business that you have, like understanding or ensuring that the employees see the value of what you are spending on the money,
Yes.
on money for employee
Yeah.
benefits are really important. Like if it is truly, in fact, more important for them to have, a stipend for wireless at home than it is to have some fee for Uber to commute into the office, that's two things around how you can work, but you could easily trade one for the other.
Right. Right. Exactly.
If the employee sees higher value in it.
Right. For sure. And I think we are sometimes afraid of not being able to make every employee happy, so we don't ask. The truth is, you probably can't make every employee happy. So
Right.
there's not. I remember one not so great survey. This is a what not to do in the survey story. We had someone in commercial real estate within the office do a survey, essentially ask everyone to describe, because we're doing some remodeling, ask everyone to describe their dream office space.
Oh.
Well, guess what? So everyone wanted their own corner office and access to a conference room that's fully equipped for any meeting that's private.
Yes.
And an additional phone booth for just noise cancellation headphones and to have very private conversations. That would have been, I don't know, $10 billion probably to build out. And it's totally not feasible. But it's great to know that we all like nice things. So yeah, so there are lots of ways to design a survey. I definitely think it's helpful to think about what can be actionable beforehand, and then also just prepare yourself to it's okay to not make everyone happy. No one has that kind of budget these days, and most importantly, to make sure you communicate back and let them know they are heard.
So I used to run this game. You're reminding me of a game that we used to run that you can kind of change the parameters around as a response to kind of what we're talking about for smaller scale companies. So a for instance would be that we did a similar survey with the student body around their student experience at UC Santa Cruz. So we didn't, instead of talking about money, we talked about slugs, and we gave them each a certain amount of slugs. And then we placed value on a certain things that were relative to housing. Like for instance, it would cost us more slugs to have something in their dorm than it would for it to be a community amenity. So I'm wondering if there's something similar that we can play from an office experience where then you give a group of people, a team, these relative value measurements and this fake currency, and then have them have a realistic conversation about how they would prioritize the currency against what they want to actually get to their own benefits package. And I think that that's something that you might be able to do in a firm size that's smaller.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think what is difficult is, obviously if you choose a combination A and I choose combination B, but
Mhm.
then we have to work in the same space. That's going to be difficult.
Oh, no, no. It's really like giving the employees an opportunity to talk to one another about how they would collectively prefer to
Oh, I
spend it.
see. Okay, so they do have to. Okay, so they do have to come to an agreement
Yeah.
on how collectively. Got it. Okay, I missed that part. Yes, yeah, that could be interesting. That could be interesting.
How do you take things from the survey back to the HR perspective and help managers be better? How do you help somebody with a lack of self-awareness? Because I've definitely have managers and I've definitely have leaders that aren't necessarily self-aware. And some of them don't even want to believe the data.
Yeah,
Do you have any thoughts on what you do in those type of situations?
it is very hard to make someone who is not self-aware suddenly become self-aware. There almost needs to be a burning platform, some kind of reason for that person to want to. And and what I've learned over the years is people will change when they want to change. Like, people will change when they want to change, not when you present a lot of convincing data, not when you even tell a great story about the data. No, people will change when they want to change. So that leader who may not be self-aware will not necessarily change their self-awareness until they want to. That means either, something that they want, they can no longer want, like a promotion, like keep leading the team. There needs to be some change that will prompt that. It's really odd for me to say this as a data person, but like for real, data itself doesn't change behavior and it doesn't change minds. Yeah, by itself at least. And it has to be, so storytelling, which is the topic that I talk about, that certainly helps because our brains respond to stories. But ultimately, if someone, like, think about that leader, if everything in my life is great, I have the job that I want, and I have the pay that I want, I'm leading the team that I'm happy with, why would I change? Why would I change? Yeah, so there's gotta be some sort of change in the system to prompt that to happen. I don't think sharing the data saying you're a really bad leader and share it in front of them will make them suddenly want to be better. Because I've run into a lot of different managers in my life, ranging from people with really high EQ and great leaders who actually share their manager feedback survey publicly with the whole team as a group discussion on, this is what surprised me, this is what I'm proud of, I will make these changes. What do you think? And that's a very healthy, strong leadership. Not everyone is there, and it's just I think there's no magic bullets, but ultimately the people who want to change will change.
So that was a lesson that I wish I would have learned when I was younger, honestly. I think there are so many different, and I've had friends work at different firms where they love their project and they really wanted to believe that things could change in the firm. And ultimately, and they really wanted to believe that they could be the source of that change in the firm. And I think ultimately, no matter how much you want to believe that, that type of change is out of your control. And at that point, you need to really think about what is in your control and what changes that you need to make in your own life to get to a better place.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Control what you can control, and I really, I stand by this. No job or career is worth your mental health. And if it's a manager that is making your life so miserable, then take it into your own hands to find a better situation. I think we probably at this point all heard horrible stories. And when I say data itself doesn't change minds, it's not just for people who are not good with data. It's also for very quantitative, savvy people. And I've seen an organization where there was a toxic leader, and the whole team provided feedback, collected evidence even on how badly this person treated them. And they share these evidence with the one over one leader in the C suite. And what happened was everyone on the team eventually left because the leadership team decided not to do anything with it and felt like that leader was contributing a lot of value to the company. So I think it comes down to that business decision sometimes, and it's unfortunately just, like I said, it's difficult, and I don't have the full story, but I know how terrible the team members must have felt when they tried to speak up, when they tried to say something, when they collected data to share, hoping for a different outcome. And I'm sure things like that happens in, on smaller or larger scale in different organizations, right? And the question is, what are you willing to do as an individual if you're on that team? What kind of fight do you want to put up with? Or do you control what's in your control, which is doing things like build your personal brand, network, and find a new job? Yeah, or build other income streams, right? Because ultimately there's a lot that's beyond our control. My dream is that every person who manages a team in any organization is required to see a therapist and a coach at least twice a year. Just like you would go to a doctor for a checkup on your physical and go to a dentist for cleaning. I think for leadership, for emotional mental health, anyone who leads a team deserves that kind of support and feedback and guidance and help that we don't traditionally provide. Like, this is not some leadership training. This is not a technical training to make you better at doing something with data and design. No, really something for you as a leader. Because I have found, going back to self-awareness that you said earlier, I have found that people in my circle who have gone to see a therapist and a coach, or one of the two, have become much more self-aware. So, like I said, I don't have a magic bullet, but I know in those kind of conversations, having those kind of reflections really helps people become more self-aware.
Talk to us about the difference between a coach and a therapist and what each provides.
So a coach is someone who guides you through perhaps problems that you're having in your life or in your career. So there are different kind of coaches. Could be a life coach, or it could be a career coach that's focused on career. So typically, or fitness coach, right? Wellness coach. So coaches usually focus on different areas in your life that you want to improve. So you might be stuck, you might want to get unstuck with a coach. And oftentimes the belief is, and by the way, I also got certified as a coach last year. One of the beliefs is that I don't know you better than you, and you have the answer within you. If I provide you with the right framework and questions to ponder, then you can get there. Why is that important? Well, think about the last time someone told you to do something. Did you immediately say, "Oh yes, let me do that"? Great. Probably not, right? But think about the last time you arrived at something that you want to do. That's very different. So there's a lot of power in coming up with a solution yourself, and a coach can help you really uncover areas that you haven't thought of by asking really reflective, thought-provoking questions. And so again, like different areas. A therapist, on the other hand, is a licensed mental health professional who have gone through the training and can diagnose and recognize signs of mental health issues and help you through them through different therapy options. And that could be more behavioral based, it could be cognitive, it could be in a group setting. There are lots of options there. So they serve different purposes in my mind, and personally I find it helpful to see both. One for, really just focus more on professional career side, and the other more personal, but it doesn't have to be that way. And some of the suggestions they provide may actually overlap, but again, they have very different training and background, and they will likely come up with different perspectives for you. And really, sometimes I also recommend it to people who feel like they don't have anyone to talk to, like no one really understands what I'm going through. And that's a great way to talk to someone in a complete confidential setting.
And is there anything else, like a final takeaway for our listeners that you might want to throw in?
Yes, gosh, take care of your health for sure. That is the most important, both physical and mental. And don't ignore the data, is my final advice. Don't ignore the data. And I shared this on LinkedIn the other day that seemed to resonate with a lot of people. How you feel on Sunday night is all the data you need. How you feel about your job on the next day, whether that's excitement, you can't wait to go to bed, feel rested, and tackle next week, or that pit in your stomach that won't go away. Those are the data points that you need to either make a change or continue on your path.
Hi, Disruptors. Thank you for joining us today on an episode of Practice Disrupted. If you like the content for today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast. Be a part of the conversation by joining me, our speakers, and other disruptors in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is Practice of Arch. That's Practice of ARCH. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to drop us a DM and say hello. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.